Hey Internet, it's Alex O'Neill again, host of Irrational Passions podcast. I'm here to do a little thing I call Alex Talks, where I'm going to sit down with a topic that I barely know anything about, and I'm going to talk at you with it. So this week I solicited from Twitter, as I occasionally will do, any ideas and front of the show, front of Irrational Passions in general. Mr. Nepp, that's at Mr. spelled out _Nepp. I don't know why I told you that. I'm just going to put it somewhere on the screen and you're going to be like, oh, typing on your little keyboards. He said, talk about Alex, because it is called Alex Talks, and he was expecting a snide remark, but I figured I'd take that idea and kind of run with it. So if you haven't been paying attention, we at Irrational Passions just had Greg Miller on the show, which is a supreme honor, I will say. Personally, on a personal level, it's insane. When I was editing the show this morning, I was still there was a moment where I'm like, holy shit, guys, we actually did have Greg Miller on the show. And it's some people on the internet, it's just like, Greg Miller, fuck that guy, he's an idiot. But to me, Greg Miller is my rising champion. Which is funny, seeing as every time he sees me, he shouts Irrational Passions. He's pretty much, I would say, as far as games criticism goes, and as far as how I feel about it, he's kind of my hero. Which is, that's hokey and corny to say, I get it, but it's true. He's the reason that I decided to start doing this. So I figured, with that happening recently, why not talk about, doing this? I know there are tons of people, when I'm at events and, people see that, Greg knows me and we talk, and he always shouts me out every time he sees me, how the fuck did that happen? How do you know Greg? How do you have this podcast? How is it that no one downloads the show, but everyone knows what it is? Which, that's what I'm going to tell you about. I'll give you the Cliff Notes origin story of Irrational Passions podcast. So it started, I'm 20 right now. It started 3 years ago when I was 17. I was in my senior year of high school. I was going into my senior year of high school. And it was kind of me and a couple friends, my friends, Scott and Evan, who Evan went to a different high school than me, and Scott and I went to the same high school. And we were just, friends. Scott and I hadn't hung out with Evan in a long time, so we were hanging out one day, and then I was telling them about Retroids, or at the time, VG Evo. It was a podcast network of a podcast that I was a big fan of, and that was, when I was 16, that was when I realized, hey, this is what I want to do. I tried the development thing. I tried doing coding in Java and Android and iOS, and it's just that shit is way over my head. And it's not very fun. So I'm well, I like playing games, but I don't want to be a game tester because I think that's just not what I want to do. That's to each his own. I don't want to be the guy that finds bugs. That's not what I want to do with games. I don't want to have to play one game so much that I hate it by the time I'm done with it. Just by drowning myself in that one game. So that was when I started listening to the IGN podcasts and other video game podcasts like the ones on VG Evo. And it was just these people are looking at video games from a critical perspective. They're, previewing, reviewing, doing all that. And they really enjoy it. And then the idea of this podcast, you can just sit down and talk about video games, which at the time I didn't really have any friends that I could just sit down and talk about video games with. So it was Scott, Evan, and I. We had just hung out and played a ton of video games, and then we watched a live stream of Game Crashers. Game Crashers is a video game podcast, video game website, gamecrashers.net. And you can see most of what Rob does. Rob's a host there, over at twitch.tv/Game Crashers. He's a good friend, and I love Rob. He's great. And it was just I watched it with them, and then after the fact, I'm guys, let's do this. They did a live show, a live podcast. I'm let's do this. Let's make a podcast. Let's sit around every week and talk about video games. Because there's something I want to do. I just didn't have anyone to do it with. And Evan and Scott were yeah, this sounds like fun. It looks like fun. We were in the chat, just talking with them. So, you go a few weeks later, and we were thinking on the name, and then, I'm looking around the internet, like, how do you start a podcast? How do you do this? And I found out about libsyn.com, which is somewhere where you can upload your podcast files. It'll create an RSS feed, which you just pop into iTunes, and it'll pop up on iTunes. And Libsyn does like all the work for you and get like detailed statistics on how many downloads you're getting and where you're getting them from. So I started a Libsyn account, I started a GoDaddy account, and I made a website. And back in when it was ippodcast.net, which not a lot of people know that. It was like pre-irrationalpassions.com. Back in the ippodcast.net, I was using iWeb, the Mac OS X, like website designer application, which is garbage. Just so you know, it will make your garbage website and make it garbage, but it is all garbage. And yeah, I that's what ippodcast.net was originally made on. And then I was like, well, this is garbage. So I found out about WordPress. Again, I knew nothing about making a website. Absolutely nothing. Still don't, for the most part, just so you guys know. But I was told that, if you want to get into this industry, that you have to just start doing it. This is, advice from Greg Miller himself on Podcast Beyond when I started listening to it. And I just, I was trying to get through high school, but in my senior year, it was a laid back year because I didn't have a full schedule. I had more time, and I was already starting college classes, and I was like, I'll just fucking start it. I'll get to it. I want to do this right now. And yeah, so I started the site. So when I found out about WordPress, I was like, well, I am going to wait for our GoDaddy thing to expire, because we just had basic hosting. We didn't have WordPress hosting like we do now. And WordPress is just a great engine to run a site on. I'm like, how do I get this? And a friend of the show, David S. Gallant, who you probably know as the guy who made I Get This Call Every Day, and then he had gotten fired over this huge Kotaku article about that and everything. He was a friend of the show back when we first started, and he's been on a few times, like I think episode 16 was the last time, or was the first time we had him on. And yeah, it was he said I have, extra WordPress space, so I will let you host it. So we hosted the original WordPress version of Irrational Passions website over at davidsgallant.net/IP podcast. And we ran out of that site for 6 months, I think, maybe 4 months. And that was when, I started doing like real reviews. I got my first review code, which was from Team Meat, and it was of Super Meat Boy. So this was all just a thing of like, you get an email and you send it. Like, you go to Team Meat's website. This is how I got my first review code. And I typed up this thing from my alex@irrationalpassions.com or at ippodcast.net email. I typed up, I'm like, hi, my name is Alex O'Neill. I write for this site. It's a little site. You probably haven't heard of it. I'm just rambling. And I'm like, I would love to review your game Super Meat Boy. And I'm sending this a week before it came out because I started hearing word, on the Bombcast and everywhere else that people had gotten review codes. I'm like, fuck, I'll just try. I sent this long email because I found their email, like Edmund McMillan's email on their site. And I just type up this long email, with the title on being Super Meat Boy review code. And in an hour, I get an email back that says, go nuts. And it has a code. And that's all it says to my ridiculously long email. And I was like, oh shit. So I get my phone out and I start texting Joe. Joe, who was like, he's an up and comer at Aces High on Twitter. He's an up and comer, just like myself. And he was getting into it at the same time as I was. And he is as important to Irrational Passions as myself, Evan, or Scott is. To its beginning, and it's where it's at now. So I'm texting Joe. I'm like, holy shit, dude, I just got a Super Meat Boy review code. He's like, what? It's crazy! So it was just like this developer had no idea who I was. Just, McMillan had emailed me back in an hour and just said, go nuts. Here's the code. So I type in, I start playing, I write my first review. My Super Meat Boy review is still up on the site if you want to check it out. I believe, it was back when we did negative points off in like 2 separate review sections. It was dumb. Our old review format was dumb. And I believe I cited the meat noises are annoying in my review. So this is like 17-year-old Alex O'Neill knows nothing about anything. Like I'd never written a review before. My first review of a game called Blacklight Tango Down. Whew. Terrible review. 1. I gave it a 6 though, which I fucking stand by that score. And because that game is broken. Blacklight Retribution, on the other hand, is pretty good. I played it. And it was just like, this was my first review I'd ever written, and then I started just writing more, and we had like this weird format back in the day. I won't bore you with all the details, even though that's kind of like what I'm supposed to do here. But basically, I just started writing and posting on the site, and that was it. Like, that was as complicated as it got. You know, yeah, it was about, what, $100, $80 for the, $80 a year for the WordPress hosting at GoDaddy, but we get a discount every year because my guy at GoDaddy is just really nice. And yeah, it was just like a dumb thing that we started. And then in February of 2011, I started IrrationalPassions.com, and I moved all of our stuff off of David's website, and we had our own server and our own website database. And you know, that was when IrrationalPassions.com started. We started our first big logo change. This is logo 6.0. It's a new logo that hasn't even come out yet. I've been using my videos to test, you know, just how it looks. I think it's a fucking gorgeous logo. It was designed by our friend Jesse, who did a fantastic job. The logo is going to launch probably within the next week or two, and I'm really excited about it. And it was just like, how did we get here from there? From, you know, we started IrrationalPassions.com in February of 2011. And then, you know, it was a whole pile up at some point where it's just like, you know, we kept going. At episode 50, we were added to the VG Evo podcast network, which had become the Retroids podcast network, because I was doing favors for Terry, who ran things over there. And he, you know, he's a good friend too. He's just like, you know, I talked to people. I got to know them, and I would have like Rob from Game Crashers on our show, Chris and Jeff from Interactive Distractions on our show. Awesome people, good friends. And it's just like, you know, we talked to them and we got to know them, and that was it. That was like literally as much effort that it took. And it was just like, you keep writing, you keep posting on the site. And like, I'm pretty much the only one that posts on the website. And I try and post like once a week or something, and I try and do one review a month, you know, and that's, you know, it's difficult with my schedule, but I'm doing these now, and I'm just doing it. Just fucking do it. Like, that's the best advice anyone ever gave me. It's just like, what is stopping you from going to Best Buy, saving up like 6 months allowance, getting a $250 HD camcorder like I have, sitting in your room, getting a couple lamps, which I have right now, and just setting up a video and recording it. It's just like nothing's stopping you. And I pay $20 a month for the Adobe Premiere suite. I get Photoshop, Adobe Premiere in there. That's all I need. I get all the other fucking things, but I don't use them. And I edit my video in Premiere, and I taught myself how to do that. And I edit my photos in Photoshop. So, I mean, that's one half of it. That's like, how do you start a website and do all that? But like, then there's the other question, like, how do you fucking know Greg Miller? It's just like, well, let me tell you. So PAX East, 2013, this year, I met Greg Miller for the first time. So before that, I met the IGN guys at PAX East 2012. That was my first PAX East. And then I went again, I managed to get to PAX Prime, 2012 as well by calling in some favors with some people. Which I make that sound like the shadiest thing. I just said, hey, Dad, my dad, he flies everywhere on business. And I'm like, can I borrow some freaking flyer miles? And he's like, sure, but you've got to fucking pay it back to me. And I'm like, okay. So I did. And, you know, I got PAX Prime, and it was awesome. And yeah, I had the time of my life at both times. So we drive up to Boston this past year for PAX East. And you can see my Alex talks about it, gearing up for PAX East back when, my TV would turn into a screensaver. Like that. It was beautiful. And yeah, it was just like, I met Greg there. You know what? I'll go through the whole story, because some people had asked me recently to relive the story for you. So IGN hosted 2 panels at PAX East 2013. One was the IGN How Do You Break Into the Games Industry with Damon, Greg, Casey, who was the editor-in-chief at the time, and Mitch. It was just what I told you right now. Start a video, start a vlog, start a website, start writing, and start doing Twitch live streams if you can, which I also do over at twitch.tv/Irrational Passions. And it was just that, and then I go up to the mic, I ask a question. I'm like, hey, I write for my own site, but I also want to write for IGN someday, and you're doing this all-star program where you're taking blogs and putting them up on the front page of the site. And like, what should I do in this situation? And Greg's like, well, what website do you write for? I'm like, it's a little thing. I don't want to promote it. And he's like, dude, fucking promote the shit out of it right here. And I say it's called irrationalpassions.com. And he's like, Irrational Passions. And that's where that came from. Because he just thought it was a funny name. And he's like, here's what you do. You have your IGN blog, right? And sometimes the community managers will pluck things off of that. Take everything you post on your website, post it on your IGN blog. Simple as that. Bam. And that's what I've been doing ever since. Just fucking with you. I'm back. Sorry. The screensaver was fucking with the autofocus. So I had to fix things. So I have my IGN blog with all my posts now. So after the fact, Greg Miller was like, I gotta run to this other panel. I think it was an Infamous panel or something. Or an Insomniac panel, one or the other. And so I went after him at some point, and I'm like, hey, I just want to let you know, you are kind of my hero. And I'm saying this to his face, and it's just like, at this point, I know how to talk to people in the games industry. You know, I've been prolific about my stories before. Of like, first time I was at PAX, I'm on the show floor, and it's just like fucking, there's Ryan Davis, Drew Scanlon, and Patrick Klepek just talking. I walk up to them, and we have like a 30-minute conversation. It's crazy. It's great. And that was the first time I ever talked to any of my people that I admire in the games industry. And it was like a huge deal. So I go up to Greg Miller. This is a year after that. So I know how to do this now. I'm like, you know, you're kind of my hero. You're awesome. And I would totally love to be your subordinate someday. And we had joked at some point. He's like, dude, no, you're awesome. He grabs my shoulder. He's like, you're the best. It's your support that makes everything awesome. And it's just like, thank you. So then, I went to the IGN panel the next day. And, that was the panel. I walked up, I asked a question. There was just like Irrational Passions yelling out. And then I hung out with Greg at the IGN meet and greet at PAX East, after that. And then I just hung out with him. I talked to him, and that was it. Like, he gave me his card at some point because he's all out of press badge. I'm like, hey, just email me or something. And I'm like, sounds great. I will get you on this podcast someday. He's like, that sounds like party. And so immediately after PAX East 2013, I emailed Greg Miller. I'm like, Greg Miller, this is my evil commentator voice. No, I emailed him, and I said, hey, you should come on the podcast sometime. And there was a lot of scheduling conflicts, and it was just like blah, 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 blah. And then E3 came up, and he kind of like went on a blackout. I'm like, cool, you're busy. But I just sent him an email from my Gmail. I was just like, I'm not going to say his email here, but, you know, if you ask him, you can get it pretty easily. I was just like, you know, blank at IGN.com. Hey, I would like to have you on my podcast, Irrational Passions podcast. We met at PAX East. You're awesome. And then, you know, jokingly, it kind of, we had some talk, and then after E3, I emailed him again. I'm like, hey, sorry I didn't get back to you, because there was a problem where one of his emails went to my spam filter. Fucking Gmail. And I was like, hey, I still want to have you on the show. What works best for you? And he's like, all right, after Beyond 300, after blah, blah, blah. And, yeah, so we set it for August 9th, which we just recorded. I just put that podcast out this morning. And, yeah, it was just like, the date was set, on like June 26th or something. And then I'm like, sounds awesome. We'll email you a week before the show to get everything worked out. And I saw him at Beyond 300, and he recognized me. He's like, Irrational Passions guy, gives me a hug. You know, I talked to all the IGN people there, which, you know, I got myself to Beyond 300. I live in Maryland, for reference, so absolutely away from everything ever. So I got myself to Beyond 300. I called in another favor, this time with my brother. But you know what? I think it was worth it to be in debt a little to my brother because I made some useful contacts there that will remember me. So, yeah, we hung on Beyond 300 and then he was on the show. It was just like, it was easy as that. And as soon as he comes on the show, you can't tell this on the show, but I'm fucking shitting my pants nervous. Because, you know, this is the guy. He is the reason why I became, you know, why Irrational Passions started, why there is an Irrational Passions, why there is a hashtag dope shirt on my shirt, because fucking dope. It's, you know, he's been probably the single biggest influence on my life, and that's not, you know, it's not to suck up to him, it's just like, he was the first guy that I was listening to Podcast Beyond when I was 16, and, you know, he's sitting there going like, yo, I was just some dumb kid from Mizzou University, or, he went to Mizzou. I'm sorry, Greg, if you watch this. You know, and I wanted to do this. I got a journalism degree and I fucking did it. I sent hasty emails to the IGN guys over and over and over again until they finally hired me. I'm like, yeah, it's you got to do that. You got to be persistent. You got to keep doing this thing, and you know you're gonna meet some cool people along the way. And it's all those people that I've just kind of met at PAXs. And just here's the best advice you'll ever get: start a blog and do all that. Yes, go to PAX. Find a PAX near you. PAX Australia, PAX East, PAX West, PAX Prime, whatever PAX it is. Go to that. If you see someone that you know and you admire, and you're like, that guy, I've been listening to a podcast with him for fucking 5 years, and he is awesome, go and talk to him. You'd be surprised how awesome those people actually are. That's exactly what happened with me and Greg. It was just like, I went up to him and I talked to him. That's it. And now I would consider him a friend, and it's a cool thing. It's just, it's also, you know, for those people that are timid and nervous and aren't as good at talking, you know, not to toot my own horn, it's just, I wasn't either. Before I started the podcast, I was very timid and very shy. But once I started the podcast, once I just started talking to a nameless void of the internet, I got better talking. And then I didn't overthink it when I went up to somebody and talked about it. Yes, my knees would start wobbling like they did the first time I met Greg. And my hands were shaking, and I was nervous, and I would sometimes slip up on my words. But I did it. And now, like, the next time I see Greg, he's just going to be, hey, man, and we'll give each other a hug, and that'll be that. We'll just talk like people, and it's just because I broke that ice initially. And it's stuff like that. Like, I can't emphasize how important it is to just, like, sometimes write an email to somebody, like, quadruple, quintuple, decacouple, whatever the word for 10 times, check it for grammar, and then send it, you know? Take a leap of faith. And that's the best advice I can give you. So if you want to know the origin story of Irrational Passions, there you go. I know it was a bit long. This is probably my longest. This is easily my longest Alex Talks. I'm sorry. But yeah, it's a long and fun story, and I love Irrational Passions. Irrational Passions is my baby. If I ever write for IGN or whatever in the future, you know, that's gonna be my priority, but I'm still gonna every Friday night, I'm gonna sit down with my friends and talk about video games. I wouldn't have it any other way. If you like this, then please like, share, and subscribe, because that's going to help us out the most. If you also have any ideas for what you want me to talk about, tweet them at me. I'm at alfinder27, and I will get back to you. I promise. There's not a lot of people tweeting at me, so I will sift through it and find you and get back to you. Also, if you have any ideas for Alex Talks to Nobishin's Thoughts, tweet them at IrrationalPod, which I will also be manning and get back to you with. Hopefully we'll actually go through those ideas. If you liked what you saw here, if you like me, I don't know if you do or not, but if you do, check out Irrational Passions podcast. That's the podcast I host. We record every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, and that goes up on YouTube here at youtube.com/Irrational Passions if you like to watch videos of podcasts. Also, check out, Greg Miller was on our podcast. It was a lot of fun. We talked about the video game industry, and we kind of just sat and asked some questions, and a bunch of people sent in questions, and we asked them to him as well. So, check that out. The video should be right there, hopefully. And, if you like this, please subscribe. That would be so awesome. And, until then, I'm going to keep talking, and hopefully you guys will keep listening.
And I just point at him like, Mark, do you like chicken wings? And he goes, yeah, I like chicken wings. And I'm like, we're going to order 2 orders of room service chicken wings. And he goes, I'm not hungry. And I go, we'll order 2 rooms. He's like, okay.